Society. We are live in person and on Zoom here at Cranbrook Institute of Science. I'm the president, Bob Tremblay. So there's an old saying, May showers, April showers bring May flowers, and that seems to be the case because I've seen trees budding and those trees with the white leaves on them all over the place. Hopefully there'll be a little more stargazing with a little less dress for winter type environment going on. Our short talk tonight will be Lunar Phases by Dr. Dale Parton. Our feature presentation will be I Know Nothing with Any Certainty, but the Sight of the Stars Makes Me Dream by Deana Weibel over there. Hi there. Deana was recently interviewed by Brother Guy and I released a podcast of that on the Vatican Observatory's website and YouTube channel. No shameless plugs here. Deana knows a boatload of friends that Brother Guy and I have mutual friends that's and in the science fiction fandom community. So I miss science fiction conventions. I haven't been since 2019. Used to present all the time. So I know that we have a couple at least one first-time attendee tonight. How'd you hear about us? You heard about us at the Ford swap meet. Usually people say meetup, but anybody else here? First timer? No? Okay. So,
yeah, I'm first timer.
Well, okay. You didn't hear about us from meetup though.
No, no, I googled, astronomy clubs in this area.
That's what our fellow here did, and he met us at the Ford swap meet. So yeah, we're on Meetup. We have an observatory at Walcott Mill Metro Park, which is at 29 Mile Road between North and Romeo Plank. We do a free star party every fourth Saturday of the month. We open it up. Members bring their scopes, set them up out on the fields. We open up the observatory and have a good time with stargazing. We also have a whole bunch of volunteer speakers. Several of our members will come to your location, set up telescopes, and or talk about astronomy and space science and lecture about them. Speaking of which, I'm jumping the gun here on my agenda, but the Great Lakes Association of Astronomy Club, of which the WAS is a member of, they would like to have a speaker swap between the clubs. So if you've considered giving a presentation to us, great, but the other clubs in the area would like to have you as well. I know Dale has done that before, and John Blum. I've given, I think, one presentation at another club, and I really need to ramp that up a bit. If you want to join or renew your membership, there's the guy right there. Members get a name badge, which I am embarrassingly not wearing. If you haven't gotten your name badge, there's a whole bunch on the table out here right now. So we'd like to go up and down the ranks, do a roll call. So hi, I'm Bob Tremblay, president.
And of course, Trump held his own nuclear summit at the White House. Well, Trump is maybe one.
You can mute that, Dale.
Yeah, that's up there. I think it should be.
Yeah, I can't mute.
Doug Bach, long-time member. I'm an academic guy. Earl Evelina's brother. Charles Strackline, secretary.
Secretary member.
Sonny Spiro. John Rask. You guys are here real follow.
Is that everybody? Sorry, I was getting this thing out. There's my name tag, which I'm not embarrassed to be not wearing anymore. There we go. All right. So WASP wearables like t-shirts and other things are available from Mark Kedzier, who is here tonight. You can order them. You can see what is available in our newsletter. So again, I mentioned that the WASP, we're a member of the Great Lakes Association of Astronomy Clubs. They host the Astronomy at the Beach event in September at Island Lake State Park. Meetings are held every second Tuesday of the month, and if you're interested in helping plan that event, we would love to have you. They would really like to have 2 members or more from each club to make sure that information gets distributed and the event gets advertised, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so I can't read that. There we go. Officer reports. I would like to thank Micah Dowd and Laura Wade for bringing the munchies for the last year or whatever. It's been, I know it's arduous, and I'd like to thank you very much. Everybody give them a hand. It's a pain in the butt. And I brought some stuff the last couple times. Tina brought some stuff too, but I meant to bring a sign-up sheet. I would really like to have do what we did before and have a different member bring stuff each club meeting. So if anybody wants to do it, next Macomb meeting, come to me at the break. Okay, Dale, first vice president. What is up?
Hello, everyone. I need speakers. Both short and long presentations. So if you got something cooking in your noodle, let me know, okay? You don't have to have it ready to go right away, but if you have some ideas for topics, please let me know. At our next meeting on May 15 at Macomb Community College, Ken Burton will give a presentation on the life of Carl Sagan, very famous astronomer and popularizer of astronomy. Then next month, we'll be back here in June. Mike O'Dowd will give a short presentation on the Dragonfly mission to Titan. Okay. Any questions? See me at the break if you have any thoughts about a possible presentation. Okay, thanks.
All right, David, treasurer, what is up? Oh, I'm sorry, wrong order. Second VP, Riyadh, you're online. I did that.
All right. All right. Hello, everyone. Yeah, we've had actually two events this last month in April. We had one open house on April 12th for the statewide astronomy night. And then again, our usual open house for Saturday, which was April 26th. During the astronomy night, we've had probably well over 100 people that showed up, including some members and scouts as well. And this last open house, we had probably in the neighborhood of maybe 25, 30 people show up, including some scouts and their guides. It was a little bit less attended, but regardless, in both cases, we've had really good dark skies, clear skies, and we've been busy observing all kinds of deep sky objects, planets, the moon when it's available, and some double stars. So it's been a really wonderful couple of events. And hopefully we'll have another clear night coming up on the next open house, which is scheduled for to start at 8 p.m. on Saturday, May 24th. So hopefully we'll see everyone out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Riyadh. Yeah, with the statewide astronomy night, I was thrilled to see how many children were out at the observatory. That I was really happy about that. So, David, what is going on with Treasury?
Okay, Treasury. So our checking account, we've got about $22,920 in there. Our credit card, we owe about $31. We had to send some documents over to PayPal to update the ownership of the account. So that was the reason for that. PayPal, we have about $1,004 in there. Cash box, we have about $280 and some change. And we also have some WAS stickers for sale if anybody needs them. And that's it.
All right, thank you. Charlie. Hi there, Secretary, what is up with minutes and anything else? Oh, I forgot to wish May the 4th to everyone. Good evening, I'm Charles Strackbein and I'm the secretary of our organization. And the biggest thing I have to report is we've been looking at an addition to the Stargate, some type of an addition that would provide a warming center and maybe a dual use with an educational center. And maybe it's enclosed, maybe it's got just open air and covered for spring, summer, and fall events. So we're looking into all that stuff right now. Just about everything's on the table. We're early. I'm gathering information, getting site plans together. And the biggest thing I did this week was I met with an architect, a friend, but architect, what was that? Anyway, early Saturday morning, got
Cool.
some feedback from him.
All right.
Yep, so we just gotta gather more what we want. He says he'll be able to tell us how he can help us out.
Awesome. Thank you, Charlie.
Yeah, thank you.
Question.
Sure.
Got the client, walk up the rental firm.
That's one of the next steps.
Yeah, if they said if we're gonna have a new building there, they're gonna want complete architectural plans, et cetera, et cetera. So we're giving them the et cetera, so.
Yep, that's the move I made. Cool.
All right.
Let's see, Jeff McLeod, he's not here, okay, okay. Vichalia, you're on, I thought I saw her online. Oh, okay. All right, so our newsletter is online. Our newsletter is done by that gentleman right there. Has anybody submitted him for another award? We need to do that. He won an award. When did you win the award for that?
2021.
Okay, so we'll get you submitted for another one. So our newsletter is fan-damn-tastic, so you should really take a look at it. So if you need to contact us, you can contact us at board@warrenastro.org. Right, okay, astronomy in the news. Do we have any updates on Comet Swan 25F? Anybody got any pictures? No, okay. I was watching I can't actually read that, jeez. Okay, was watching a Fraser Cain Space Bites on YouTube, and he was saying that Mike Brown, which is Pluto killer Mike Brown, and Konstantin Batygin, I hope I pronounced that right, sifted through a whole bunch of old IR survey data and may have found a candidate for the long predicted Planet 9. I'm not going to go into details. You can watch the video, but it's pretty compelling. So I went and looked up Planet 9 on the NASA site. It was referred to as Planet X. That was before 2016 when Pluto got reclassified, which is pretty funny. I mentioned in my President's Field of View in the newsletter, but I thought it was worth bringing up again here. There's a new Zooniverse citizen science project called Galaxy Zoo JWST. You can browse through thousands of galaxy images from a JWST survey and help categorize them from the comfort of your home PC or mobile device. So what did I just do? Heavens. So that was a pretty cool project. I got that in my email. Speaking of email, I got one today at the Vatican Observatory, and somebody was saying that as you may know, Mars is currently transiting the Beehive cluster, which I didn't know. So I went to Stellarium, and yeah, it's there tonight. So if you want to take a picture of that, it's happening. He said it's also happening in 2026 on this date, and I didn't check it. And he says, my calculations show that this disproves the heliocentric theory. A random email to the Vatican Observatory website. I get a lot of things like that. Like some I can't even talk about. Yikes. So asteroids, we have over 1,000,004 total asteroids, up a couple hundred from last month. We have 38,000 near-Earth asteroids, up 200 from last month. Exoplanets, we've got 5889, up 22, and 7575 candidates, up 51. I'm still waiting for that candidate number to start shooting up as Gaia data comes in. The NASA Exoplanet Archive released a new data set containing, get this, 8 million light curves in 3 optical band passes from 20 fields in the galactic bulge over a 3-year period down to 18th magnitude. So want to go find an exoplanet and analyze that data yourself? It's all freely available out there. On the predicted nova of T Corona Borealis continues to not occur based on historical data of it erupting roughly every 80 years. We're still not quite past due yet, but spaceweather.com says the solar wind is blowing over the weekend. The speeds topped 700 kilometers per second, sparking a G1 class geomagnetic storm. Could happen again today. and they're expecting auroras. So keep an eye out for auroras. There is a monster sunspot. Let's bring this up here. So there is a monster sunspot. For the those in our viewing audience, just go to spaceweather.com and there's a whole bunch of stuff there. But there's a monster sunspot. They said these guys usually produce big solar flares, and that's why the eerie quiet of this sunspot is so strange. Despite being more than half the size of the Carrington sunspot, today's behemoth has produced only a handful of C-class flares, which I'm happy for. So if you're on Facebook, check out CME Alerts and the Solar Activity Group. The Solar Activity Group is fantastic. You can find amateur photos of the sun that would make astronomers from the 19th century cry. So Riyadh, double stars. You mentioned, it's down here. You mentioned that we saw double stars, or you were watching double stars. I saw Castor for the first time when we were at the statewide astronomy night. What other ones do you look at?
Well, we've been looking at Epsilon Boötes, ISAR, and we also, which is a very beautiful double star, somewhat of a tight double. It's about maybe 2.5 or so arc seconds. But we also looked for Zeta Boötes, and Zeta Boötes right now is about 0.6 or 0.7 arc second. So we saw a little bit of elongation on the star, but we didn't see a split, of course. You need perfect seeing conditions. The scope is capable of that, and the weather is capable of showing down to 0.5 arc second, but we need really good conditions to see that. So we're looking at some really not just good, beautiful double stars, but some very challenging ones as well.
Riyadh, question for you.
Yeah.
Our double star resident expert. That's the setup. In, say, a decade, do any of the double stars that you often look at change their angular position with respect to each other appreciably?
Yes, Zeta Boötes has changed for sure. I used to observe it in the 80s. And it was, you can split it back then, but it closed since then, and it's now opening again.
Okay, neat. Thank you.
Yep, welcome.
Whenever I get around to doing that double star presentation, I'm going to have to make sure to talk about the orbital periods of these things and how they change over time.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see.
Can you get to the Facebook page for our club?
Yes.
Rick Gossett, I believe, uploaded a picture of the sun today on the Facebook page.
Inbox, let's go to face space. Hopefully nothing embarrassing comes up. We're an Astronomical Society. That guy?
No, he said the sun, picture of the sun.
Picture of the sun. These guys.
Yeah.
All right, can I share it? I'm going to share this to our viewing audience if I can figure out how. Share it. Guess that.
Forget this. Is that Charles? Rick G on. It's Jeff Charles. On YouTube. Oh, I see something.
Oh, that's the one that it's right here right now. Yeah, that one rotated into view. That's the big one. There's a really cool picture of a light bridge. You see separation between the two there on space weather. All right. So do we have any astrophotos? Anybody have any astrophotos to share other than that? Anyone? No? All right. Well then, Dale, I guess. Ready to do that? Am I going to introduce you? Okay, then. We're going to start our presentation. Actually, let's get it up first here.
I mean, that's short.
Okay. PowerPoint, lunar phases. I'm big in it. Slideshow from beginning.
So people online can see
Yeah,
it.
I gotta share it first. Share. Oh my God. Yeah, pardon. All right, so take this down to. How do I get rid of that?
Don't worry.
Yeah, all right.
Okay, just move it over.
Yeah, view. From beginning.
That's good.
All right.
And people can see it, right?
Yeah, is that online, Dale?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Just right. Okay, our short presentation tonight, this evening, will be given by Dr. Dale Parton. He has been a member of the WAS since 1998 and is currently our first vice president. He's spoken many times to the society, and his topic is lunar phases.
Thank you.
All right. There you go.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, this is a continuation of some short presentations I've been giving on making astronomy simple. Okay, I gave one presentation, for example, on how when I was 14 years old, I figured out how to measure the my latitude by doing a measurement on Polaris, its angle from the horizon. And then more recently, I gave a presentation on measuring longitude and latitude by just having a stick sticking up out of the ground and measuring the length of its shadow during the day and on many different days, from which I got, along with my wristwatch, my longitude. Also, I could get latitude, the tilt of the Earth, the length of the Earth's year, stuff like that out of that measurement. So, and I might have given another one on some other topic, trying to make things simple for people who are new to amateur astronomy. Today, this evening, I thought I would talk about lunar phases. And for the most part, what I'll be showing you is stuff that I use in my introductory astronomy class at Macomb Community College to teach my students about this. So it didn't take a lot of preparation on my part. I hope I don't screw it up by saying something stupid. But that can happen, okay?
I've never had that happen in a presentation.
I have. I just cringe sometimes. So I think we all know that if you look at the moon from one night to the next or 1 week to the next, it looks different. It goes through different phases. So on the 1st of May, the moon started out as a crescent moon, and the amount that we saw illuminated increased each night until we got to what's called a first quarter moon, which is a weird name in a way because it's half illuminated, not 1/4 illuminated. I'll explain that one shortly. Then today, it's a little more illuminated, and it strikes me, isn't May the 5th a thing? Like
May the 4th.
I thought it was Cinco de Mayo.
Oh, yeah. Every day something. In the US.
I don't even know what Cinco de Mayo is all about. I just know it's a thing.
Oh, square root day,
Square root day?
yeah, 5 times 5 is 25. So like the calendar year, 5, 5, 25.
Yeah, but there's a Cinco de Mayo every year. I think it's something else, but I don't know what it is. Okay. Show you how dumb I am. At least I remembered it was a thing, you know? So, okay, so we go from first quarter moon. Then on May the 12th, it's a full moon, fully illuminated. On May the 20th, it's a last quarter moon, also called a third quarter moon. And then it'll become a crescent and then become a new moon on the 27th of May and then start over again. So it turns out that the moon goes through a whole cycle of these phases once every 29 and a half days. That's how long it takes the moon to orbit the Earth as seen from the Earth, okay? So I'd like to try to have us understand that cycle a little better. So this is a slide that I use with my astronomy classes. So if you follow me, the sun is over way off on the right-hand side here, right? So sunlight's coming in from the right, and the Earth is here in the center. And I show you twice the moon going around the Earth, here and then here. So those are two very different views of the moon. This set of pictures or pictures of the moon is what you would see if you're way off, far away from the Earth and the moon, like where you're sitting now, okay? From that perspective, the side of the moon that's illuminated, half illuminated, is over here in every one of these pictures of the moon. And the side that's not illuminated is on the far side from the sun over here. Okay, so that's what you would see, not from the Earth, but if you're on Mars or someplace like that. You're on Mars right now, okay? Things look different if you think about what the moon would look like from the surface of the Earth, which is how we see it when we look up in the sky. From that perspective, here we are on the moon. When the moon is here, we can only see the darkened part of the moon. We cannot see any of the light part of the moon. So it looks completely dark as seen from the Earth. That's what we call a new moon. As I said, it takes 29 and a half days to go all the way around. For the purpose of this discussion, I'm going to round that off to 28 days. Between friends, it's about that many days, okay? Because that way it takes 4 weeks to go around once. So 1 week after the new moon, it's over here. It's 1/4 or 1/4 of the way around. What happened to the cursor? So when the moon goes from new moon to first quarter moon, it went 1/4 of the way around the Earth. So that's why it's called a first quarter moon, even though as seen from the Earth, it looks like this, half illuminated, not 1/4 illuminated. It's talking about what fraction of the way it is all the way around. Something wrong, Bob?
No.
Okay. So if it takes about 28 days to go all the way around, this is about 1 week to go from here to here. In between is a waxing crescent moon, which would look something like this. And that's one of the views of the moon that artists like to paint in the sky. Artists never like to paint a gibbous moon. It's something about that that just doesn't look good. I don't know how to explain it. They'll typically paint a full moon or a crescent moon, something like that.
How many of you have caught a waxing crescent moon at the wrong time in a movie?
Yeah. They sometimes don't get their astronomy straight.
Yep.
So 1 week to go from new moon to first quarter moon, in which case it looks like this. Waxing, by the way, I put this down here. Waxing is an old English term. It's, what's the term? It's antique or something. Archaic. It's archaic English. Waxing in Old English means increasing. So a waxing crescent moon means it's an increasing moon in the sense that each night more and more of the moon is illuminated as seen from the Earth. On the other hand, over here, I'll skip ahead. This is a waning crescent moon. Each night, less of the moon appears to be illuminated. So takes 1 week to go from new moon to first quarter moon. Another half a week or so, we're looking at a waxing gibbous moon. Then 2 weeks after a new moon, we get to a full moon. Another few days, a waning gibbous moon. Third quarter moon, which is 3/4 of the way around, a waning crescent, and then a new moon. Now you guys are experts. So I will ask the question, why is there not an eclipse of the sun every time there's a new moon? You would think there would be. The sunlight is coming this way. The moon blocks light from over here. So you would think there'd be an eclipse of the sun. Did I say moon or sun? Yeah, an eclipse of the sun. You would think every time we had a new moon, there'd be the shadow of the moon on the Earth, and you'd have an eclipse of the sun.
Any of your students ever get that answer right?
No, not without some help. And similarly, 2 weeks later, when there's a full moon, why is there not an eclipse of the moon as it moves into the Earth's shadow? Why don't we have an eclipse of the sun and an eclipse of the moon every month? Yes.
The moon has a crazy orbit.
The moon has a crazy orbit.
It's 5 degrees tilted to the plane.
Ooh, somebody knows. I'm not sure a crazy orbit is that scientific of a term. For one thing, it sounds astrological, like you're assigning some kind of like mental defect to the moon or something. Okay. So yes, Doug Bach had it exact. Just 5 degrees. Unlike the tilt of the Earth relative to the sun, which is 23.5 degrees, give or take a 1/10 of a degree.
So it doesn't orbit the equatorial plane.
Right.
And the equatorial plane is tilted anyway, so maybe it is crazy.
Wow.
Well, eclipses will happen as the either ascending node or the descending node of the orbit.
Right. But I'm not going to use the term ascending node and descending node.
I think Kerbal Space Program, I know what he's talking about.
Yeah, well, how many people do that? This is something you might genuinely consider whether that's crazy behavior. Playing Kerbal Space Program day and night.
We all know that.
So here's in the simplest terms I can make it be. Oops. Here's the moon going around the Earth, and notice, I mean, here's the path of the Earth around the sun, the blue ellipse. The moon goes around the Earth in an orbit that's tilted with respect to the Earth's orbit around the sun. So when, for example, the Earth is over here, the moon comes up above the plane of the Earth's orbit, and the shadow of the moon passes over the top of the Earth. And 2 weeks later, when the moon is over here, it passes above the plane of the Earth. It passes above the Earth's shadow. So again, the Earth's shadow misses the moon. Okay, but as the Earth continues to orbit the sun, over here, you'll finally get to the point where even though this 5-degree tilt of the moon's orbit around the Earth is still there, nevertheless, there's a point where the Earth, moon, and sun line up, and the moon's shadow falls on the Earth here, so you can have an eclipse of the sun. And when the moon is over here, the Earth's shadow hits the moon, and you can have an eclipse of the moon. Okay, and then over here, you can see the Earth's shadow passes under the moon, and the moon's shadow passes under the Earth. So you go around and around. Twice a year, it's possible to have an eclipse of the sun and moon. You don't necessarily have one. It depends on exactly where the shadows go. There's a question way in the back there.
Yeah, I'm just going to comment that.
Nice and loud.
I'm just going to comment that the apparent size of the moon is about a half a degree, which is about a tenth of your relative tilt. So you know, the larger the moon would be, the more likely to recover the sun.
Right.
So there's about a 10-to-1 ratio there, which is why it's fairly infrequent.
Yes, and the other way around, the Earth, it has a diameter about 4 times bigger than the diameter of the Earth. So there are eclipses. So the moon goes into the Earth's shadow roughly 4 times more often than the Earth going into the moon's shadow. So that's why lunar eclipses are much more frequent than eclipses of the sun. And also why when there's an eclipse of the moon, the entire moon can go into can be eclipsed, right? Because the shadow of the Earth is bigger in diameter than the size of the moon. Whereas when it's the other way around and the moon passes between the Earth and the sun, the moon is 4 times smaller than the Earth, so only a small part of the Earth experiences a total eclipse. Yes.
The fact that the Earth has an atmosphere makes it up, you get the refraction, so the moon never really gets black.
Right.
You know, still have a fairly decent illumination, where you get a pretty black spot or shadow.
Yeah. Yes. The point is being made that since the Earth has an atmosphere, light refracts or bends as it goes through the Earth's atmosphere heading out here. So the short wavelength light, blue, green, yellow, is scattered out of that direction, and only the long wavelength, red and orange, goes all the way through the Earth's atmosphere and bends so that even if the moon passes through the Earth's shadow, it looks reddish orange, not black, because of that refraction of long wavelength light. That's also why the moon and the sun tend to look kind of orange or reddish when they're just above the horizon. The light from either one of them is passing through a thick layer of air if it's just above the horizon. So the short wavelength light is scattered into other directions, and the moon or the sun looks kind of reddish or orangish colored. That's also why the sky is blue, right? Because when the sunlight is passing overhead, the short wavelength light is scattering in all directions, including in our direction. We look up, we see blue. I teach my students all of that stuff too. They can go home and seem really smart because they understand why the sky is blue. I think, yeah, that's the end of my presentation. Any questions? Yes.
When's the next total solar eclipse in North America?
I don't remember. I don't think it's real soon. Anybody know?
Next total solar eclipse. Global knowledge.
Let's say roughly 10 years.
I think it's 46, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think it's quite a ways.
2045, August 12th, 2045.
I missed the last one, I came through, I think, Ohio.
Yeah, that was a bad one to miss because it was nicely close. Any other questions?
Question, just have an observation, it just amazes me on the moon's shadow, how far away the moon is, and its shadow can reach the earth. I just looked up here, the earth's shadow, the umbra extends 1.4 billion kilometers, the penumbra extends infinitely. My thought is, can the earth's penumbra make an asteroid dim down? Is that
No,
something you can
no,
try?
no.
No?
It does not extend infinitely far. It comes to a point, doesn't quite make it here because the sun is over 100 times bigger in diameter than the earth. So the earth's shadow is tapered. So even the penumbra, the partial shadow, will come to an end.
Okay.
There is a ton. I mean, let me just say this. I cut what I was going to cover tonight down tremendously. The number of topics one could talk about with the moon is just incredibly huge. In fact, our last presentation at Cranbrook, not at Macomb, was by Professor Nicole Zellner of Albion College. She was talking about all different stuff about the moon. Okay. And she didn't cover any of this stuff. I mean, there's just huge amount one could talk about with respect to the moon. Okay, so thank you for your attention. Bob, back to you.
Okay, at this point, we usually like to take about a 20-minute snack break or bio break. So that puts it at almost exactly 8 o'clock straight up. So let's reconvene 2 minutes after 8 and take a 20-minute break and see you then. So let's stop that share. Hi there. For the background, I get grid view. Why am I? Yes. Yeah, all of it. And what? All of it's probably not going to fit, but yeah. There, that's how I do it. Jeez. Wow, there's a lot of people online. We have some questions from the chat. That's cool. Oh, take a break. I don't think so.
Yeah. I brought it, I guess. I don't know. No. Well, I'm going on.
Are you at the beach?
If you want to get some snacks.
You know what I'm saying? Are you at the beach tonight?
I've got a box sitting there.
Yeah.
It is simple. Are they for? Not bad. Oh, okay. Okay, good.
And all of them here are cool or. But it is kind of like a. Plywood. Yeah. I also.
Oh, yeah. You're actually. We're talking about. So he built my work here. Replaced the servers. I actually made an
That's okay. You just, I thought it was a really.
I heard you don't know it. They don't.
I thought it was a really, it was just a really beautiful looking thing. You probably cost a gazillion dollars. It was probably $1 million thing, holy cow, look at that. They got all kinds of. Actually, like say, part of the building.
Like somebody just.
Yeah.
Who else is in the education thing, in our Tri-County area? There's just some other. What's the name?
It depends upon the membership. Are you new or in? Yeah, I'm sorry, can you spell your last name? Oh, great. Senior? And then wow, all in cash? Okay. Yeah. All right, yeah. That's what also has. Newsletter. She wants it all like.
I just put a three-bed shed in place. Sorry.
And also, they have a picture of what's up in the sky.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Starts off looking at the sky toward the south where the waters.
They have Apple version for home. They must.
Yeah.
They have
I just showed up.
Yeah.
Hold it up and see it. There to Star Trek.
That was in Ohio.
Good seeing you.
Oh.
Right. There is that.
Yeah.
One of those things
Yeah.
where my brain is like.
They get all the bills.
There's a-
It'll create some.
Oh, look at that, look at that one. Someone can track that one. Then whether, I got your couch, that's kind of stuff on the ground. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, no, I like that. I want to be able to do that.
There you go. You brought in,
An old man.
So let's say you want, marketing or control.
I know.
I know, right now, you're like.
Yeah.
Go to the website and then the newsletter.
Yeah.
Number one, I'm very hard of hearing, but if the orbital planes of the Earth and the Moon did coincide, then we'd have one every side, and it'd be along the equator.
No.
Here's an example of one.
Actually,
If there would be any slight change from the moon's orbit, then they could have
Right.
different paths.
I thought it was permanent.
Yeah, grand skills there.
It doesn't. So.
Model of site steel.
Instead of saying at 1 degree off. And just so it changes the degrees off the ground. I thought that was not from like that here. You rotate it going down. Back up.
So it's like this, right? So for the moon boat, the moon shuttle goes under the.
Yeah.
So once it has
Yeah, I mean, that's, they're all phased like this. But what you can do is you sort of hold them there over here, and then out there, you all complicated, and then sort of wash it off. Yeah. It's not later, I'm out here.
So I thought there was
Oh, really? No, it stays the same. I would flip, we take the whole thing. And we would have to decide.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is combination Earth Moon.
Oh, great.
Like this.
Yeah, but that's not always, you know, at a 5 degree.
Then it got lost fairly fast.
You might see that or something like this.
That's what I mean for.
No.
I can't really.
Right.
Yeah, it's not like my. Yeah, so I learned about the wax.
That was another way.
Yeah, I never really. Yeah, I kind of felt.
And the temperature dropped from 100. It's not a requirement. So everybody ran outside. But, yeah, it's wrong. Now, I've been outside of the.
Yeah.
I visited.
Right.
Ah, so you go over.
Yeah, it's nice. It's nice. But I was living in but.
Yep, I got it.
Same thing.
About a month ago. And I haven't really used it yet.
Oh, the whole part is slightly.
So bad.
It was
Yeah.
real.
So it's really hard, wild. I haven't tried to follow it. I'm really not trying to do that.
Yeah, go ahead, I'll stop.
But it's.
You didn't want it.
Yeah.
Yeah, all you.
And.
You got it, Rich. I haven't been on it.
Somebody might be like, help me. I do, I know, I'm just. I used to deal with a couple miles a day, but it showed.
Okay, 2 minutes. And I see a David Levy. Hi, David.
Sorry
Since
to
we
be
are we're on a snack break right now. Tell you what, can you wait 2 more minutes and then I'll get you on.
sure. Thank you.
Wow, we got a lot of people online. Look at that. That's cool. Got a good audience here too, but last meeting at Macomb Community College, we did not have any seats available. I was shocked. Was pleased. Of course, I got popcorn husk.
So David, have you seen that monster sunspot and the sun today? Wow.
Yeah, it is really something.
Yeah, spaceweather.com is mentioning that, even though it's half the size of the Carrington one, it's only blowing off little minor sea flood, which is fine with me. Okay, it is 8 o'clock, or at least I have 7:59 here. About 2 minutes more, we're gonna get started, and we're gonna have David Levy give a short soliloquy. Is everybody in here now? Yeah, we got a minute. All right. All right, so let's get the president, David up there. There is David Levy. What's your coffee mug say? I saw something on Pluto. All righty, so it is 8 o'clock. All right, we have David Levy here. He just came on, so I'm gonna turn the floor over to him for now. Go ahead, David.
Well, thank you very much. Sorry to be late today, but better late than never, as they say. And you are right, there is a monster sunspot group on the sun right now. I picked it up about 4 days ago as it was just coming on. And it seems to be in the process of breaking up right now, but there are a lot of little sunspots in it, like 40 or so. Anyway, but it's certainly worth to keep an eye on. And if it decides to produce a coronal mass ejection, we're going to get some northern lights. But at the moment, it seems to be minding its own business, which is always very nice for sunspot groups. Anyway, my quotation for tonight will be from the famous Canadian poet Sir Charles G.D. Roberts. It's called Under the Pillars of the Sky. Under the pillars of the sky, I played at life. I knew not why. The grave recurrence of the day was matter of my trivial play. The solemn stars, the sacred night, I took for toys of my delight. Till now, with startled eyes, I see the portents of eternity. Thank you very much, and thanks for forgiving my lateness today.
Oh, no problem. Thank you, David. All right, so let's do view, speaker, view. All right, so let's get the presentation. Oh, I don't need that up anymore. Share. Where would share? Got way too many windows open here. Beginning, and we're shared. Get that off on the edge. Can I just get her on there? What? These guys? There we go. And I want speaker. How do I get the speaker? God, this is confusing. I am just going to take that over there. All right, ready?
Wow. We have a distinguished speaker this evening. Dr. Deana Weibel. And we have Bob Tremblay to thank for finding her. She is a professor of anthropology at Grand Valley State University. How often do we have an anthropology professor speak to us about astronomical things? Specializing in the anthropology of religion, pilgrimage, tourism, and space exploration. I wish I could take one of your classes. It sounds interesting. I just finished an anthropology class on ancient civilizations at Oakland University. She has conducted field research at a diverse range of sites, including the Black Madonna Shrine in France, the Vatican Observatory, and Spaceport America. She has a forthcoming book entitled The Ultraview Effect: What We Can Learn from Astronauts About Awe, Humility, and Exploring the Unknown. Her topic tonight is equally exotic sounding. It is, I know nothing with any certainty, but the sight of the stars makes me dream. Potential impacts of cosmic vistas on spacefaring culture. Deana. No, to advance the slide, just roll that button like that.
All right.
And people will be able to see the cursor who are online. So
Okay.
use that for a pointer.
Okay, that sounds good.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you to Bob Tremblay and also to Dale Parton. And very pleased to be invited here tonight. I wanted to start out with the quotation that, well, first of all, I wanted to say a couple things just for fun. Am I not? Okay, Bob is. Oh, okay. All right, Bob just got the moonlight going. I also wanted to say, since Bob had mentioned the podcast that he worked on with Brother Guy and me, I was just at an Explorers Club event, and one of my colleagues from the Chicago Great Lakes chapter of the Explorers Club, who was on expedition in Greenland, mentioned listening to the podcast.
Are you kidding?
I am not kidding, and he was very pleased. So he said he was sitting kind of on an ice shelf with his legs hanging down, listening to that podcast. So I thought that was very cool and that I would share that. So you're welcome. All right, so the quotation, I know nothing with any certainty, but the sight of the stars makes me dream, actually comes from Vincent van Gogh. And the previous picture I stole from the internet, but I'm being a kind of a goof right now. This version of the picture was taken by my son last week at the Museum of Modern Art. So I thought I'll use the real one. But it is an idea, a quotation that really kind of resonates with what a lot of astronauts I've spoken to have felt when they've looked out into space at certain vistas that are difficult to process for the small and limited human mind. And I'm very interested in the idea of travel as a source of transformation. As Dale mentioned, I have studied pilgrimage, I've studied tourism. The idea of going to special places and having experiences in those places that changes who you are as an individual is something that I'm really interested in. Not just as a fellow tourist, but also as a cognitive anthropologist, somebody interested in the way that religious or symbolic or spiritual experiences affect people. And I'm very interested in subjective experiences. So I'm interested in what the individual experiences, and I'm going to be talking a little bit about the way my research works. But the point here is when I talk about space, I'm not necessarily talking about, you know, celestial bodies. I'm not talking about comets or solar flares or even hardware. I'm talking about the people, sometimes on Earth, sometimes in space, who are experiencing space and what this is like for them. Okay, so this is a little preview. I'm giving you this ahead of time. This is kind of like a prelude to a prelude. So there are different types of awe that people experience in space. And Dale mentioned the title of my forthcoming book should be next year. It's with University of California Press, and I'm currently spending this summer revising. But a lot of you, I'm sure, are familiar with Frank White's term, the overview effect. Astronauts looking at the Earth from space. You can do it while you're in orbit. Even if you have a very unpopular suborbital flight, people do get the experience of the overview effect in those short few moments that they look from the windows of the spacecraft back at Earth. People, according to Frank White, feel awe. They feel a bit of clarity, like this is what the Earth is really like. That feeling of I understand it now. And a very strong connection. A lot of the astronauts I've interviewed have felt very moved by the fragility of the planet and awareness of how narrow the atmospheric band is. Although at the same time, I have talked to astronauts who have been not moved at all. One of them told me, I'm paraphrasing a little bit, something along the lines of, they told me there wouldn't be any borders and that the Earth was very fragile. And yeah, I knew that already. So some people get an experience, some don't. My term that I came up with a tip of the hat to Frank White is the ultraview effect, which is the experience of looking out into space, particularly when dark adapted, and it's very rare. I've interviewed retired astronauts. They're the people who I've talked to who've had experienced it, but not all of them have. I'll talk about the very specific circumstances you have to be in order to do this, but you need to be dark adapted and look deep into the Milky Way. And this has been a form of awe that is not the pleasurable, reassuring feeling of looking back at the Earth. It's a different kind of reaction, and I'll talk about that. So I'm going to be talking to you about astronauts who've described both. And I hired an artist for my book, and you're going to see some of his illustrations throughout. So this is an image, a symbolic artistic image of the ultraview effect with an astronaut kind of looking out into the stars of space. So let me back up a little bit. Dale said you don't get anthropologists, so I will talk a little bit about anthropology the way I do it. I'm a cultural anthropologist, sometimes called a sociocultural anthropologist, and what I study are human beings. And that's about it. I remember when I was in graduate school, somebody was talking about doing anthropology in some place or another and wondered if it was possible, and my advisor said, are there humans there? If there are humans there, anthropologists can study it. So we have humans in space, it becomes a site where anthropologists can do research. I have done research in a lot of different places. Unfortunately for me, there's no such thing as a little space village where I can go and live among the space people, at least not yet. So I've done what's known as multi-sited research, where I've traveled from location to location. Some of these pictures up here, I was at the Mojave Air and Space Port interviewing a test pilot for one of the companies that works on spacecraft. And he guilted me into taking a ride into a kitchen-made airplane that he had built on his own. I was a little hesitant, and he said, well, my last passenger, who was a Holocaust survivor of age 90, didn't mind. And I was like, fine, I will fly in your plane. So that worked really well. This one, I'm at JPL. This is an Earth analog to the Curiosity rover, and she's in the Mars yard. And they run tests on this rover to test things before they do them on Mars. Back in 2022, these were both 2019. 2022, I was studying this company, Celestis, that sends cremated remains out into space. And I went to the Spaceport America with them and was able to attend a memorial service for people whose ashes were being sent into space that day. And then this is actually at Castel Gandolfo. These are the domes in the original Vatican Observatory. And it was a beautiful site. And this was part of an Irish astronomy club group. I also, when you guys were talking about Pluto, I thought I should have included a picture that I had taken when I was at Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory, because I was getting a picture taken and they made me stand back and make this sign, which is 9, because I was at the New Horizons section. So New Horizons, Alan Stern's folks, Pluto is planet 9. They are doubling down on that.
Yes, they are. The guy has comments about that.
I know he does. I'm just studying the people. I'm not taking sides, but I do have a picture where I'm like that. Okay. So swerve here, suffering. Yes, I'm going to be talking to you about suffering today with a big smile on my face, but I am trained as an anthropologist of religion. I went to University of California, San Diego. The big stuff there is psychological anthropology, cognitive anthropology, which is how we think, and then also anthropology of religion. And one of the things that's interesting in religion that I talk about with my students at Grand Valley is this idea of asceticism. And asceticism is when somebody denies their body for the sake of their soul. We don't see this in every religion. For instance, neo-pagans and Wiccans are not big into asceticism. But a lot of the older religions, including the Abrahamic religions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, and also the karmic religions, such as Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism, do practice this idea that if you allow yourself to suffer, if you allow your body to encounter difficulty, it allows your spirit to sort of soar and improve the situation that you're in spiritually. And so I have, somebody lying on a bed of nails. This is somebody probably in Hinduism following I'm going to forget the paths. You don't care. It's in Sanskrit. This is actually a depiction in Thailand of Siddhartha Gautama, the original Buddha, who tried a path of suffering before he decided the middle path was where he needed to go. This is a book by a colleague of mine who I went to graduate school with, Rebecca Lester. She did anthropological field work in the a convent in Mexico, where she was studying the use of essentially anorexic nervosa, women who were nuns starving themselves for the sake of spirituality. And she has a very interesting take on that. I should point out, and I didn't, that what anthropologists do when we do our research is called ethnographic fieldwork. And so we go to the place where the people we want to study are, and we speak their language, we participate in their customs, we eat their food, wear their clothes, blend in as much as we can, which is hard to do when you're studying space stuff. And you also do interviews, and you try to get really deep qualitative data. We're not interested in breadth. We're not interested in statistical samples. We're interested in getting very deep, long-term information about a community. And in this case, I'm studying the widespread group of people I've come to refer to as the space community, which includes engineers, it includes flight surgeons, it includes people who design spaceships and send them out, it includes computer programmers and pilots, and it includes astronauts. And so when I'm talking about the work I'm doing, it's based on long-term interaction with, getting to know people very well, and then conducting both formal and informal interviews. Anyway, back to suffering and discomfort. When I go, as I frequently do, to NASA Human Research Program's Investigators Workshop, which is held in Galveston every January, it's one of my favorite field sites. I am encountering papers and posters being given by people who are working in the field of space medicine. And I get a lot of information about how people suffer in space. And what's interesting, and this is kind of a preview of what I'm looking at here, people on Earth in different religious communities will sometimes deny their body for the sake of their spirit. There's something, and often that denial leads people into a frame of mind that makes them more open to religious experiences. And I'm exploring whether or not there's something similar happening with people who undergo a lot of physical difficulties in space. So I want to talk about that. So we have a lot of types of discomfort. Nausea is really common. Space sickness is very common. Muscle weakness, people will go through atrophy. Vision problems are a huge issue, and I'll talk about that. Obviously, isolation, it depends on what you're doing, but some of the Apollo astronauts, especially when you were orbiting the moon while your fellows were walking on the moon, were the most solitary people that have ever existed. In fact, Al Worden, I think, of Apollo 15, is in the Guinness Book of World Records as the most isolated person to have ever lived. Not for too long, but, you know, it's there. So I'm looking into whether it's possible that astronauts are suffering for a purpose, a greater good, a sense of destiny, a sense of something larger than themselves, and are willing to make that sacrifice. And I'm aware there are other ways that people make sacrifices for the greater good, but I'm interested in what it looks like in this case. So, as an anthropologist, I studied pilgrimage and tourism, and there are some interesting parallels that I've written about at different points in my career. Pilgrims often take long journeys for spiritual growth. The couple you'll see in the picture up here were a couple I met while I was doing research at the Black Virgin Shrine of Rocamadour in France. And they were actually not on pilgrimage so much to Rocamadour, but it was a stop while they were going on their trip to Santiago de Compostela. There are paths that lead through Spain, but there are 4 of them that start in France and intersect when they get to Spain. And at that point, they all become one. But there are people who start in France in different areas. And I lived with nuns in Rocamadour. I had basically they had something similar to a hostel in their upstairs where they would have like a bed and a sink and a shared kitchen and shower for pilgrims. And I stayed in one of those rooms for many months, a very long time actually. And I would see new pilgrims every morning. And I would talk to them about their experiences walking. I would talk about blisters and tendinitis, and this idea that they were carrying heavy packs and going through extremes of weather and encountering wild dogs and other things that were really dangerous. And they often chose the danger intentionally. I met one pilgrim who left to walk to Jerusalem without any money intentionally because he felt that God would provide. There are ranges here of different people doing things, but in a lot of cases, if you're doing something because you feel it's fulfilling, especially in a spiritual way, it is going to be something you're willing to make sacrifices for. So, like astronauts, pilgrims also have exhaustion, disorientation, and moments of awe, and I'm very interested in those moments of awe. Pilgrims often endure discomfort on their long journeys, as we talked about, and sometimes it's in these moments where things are the most difficult that people feel the closest to God. Or there were a lot of non-Catholics, by the way, on Santiago de Compostela. Definitely some atheists, but there are also people from groups like neo-pagans and Wiccans, who I kept running into in France, who were doing Catholic pilgrimages, but interpreting in their own way. In any case, this idea that you can be in places that cause physical hardship and expose you to awe and be transformed physically and spiritually by that is something that the parallel really seems to be there. One of the people I interview is an astronaut I refer to by the pseudonym Theo. In cultural anthropology, there is a need to protect your interlocutors, the term we use, our respondents, our informants, the people we interview. And Theo is the name I've given to one of my more spiritual seeking interview subjects, an astronaut during the shuttle era who absolutely sought spiritual experience in space. And he had multiple flights. And when I was talking to him recently last month about space sickness, he said 70% of the newbies get sick, with 50% actually vomiting. A lot of people just work through it. With the ones who can't work, you have to hang them on the wall till they recover and take over their jobs. Now, afterwards, I went, wait, and I didn't follow up. So I don't know if he means literally hang them on the wall, because you could in the space station, right? That could happen, or just kind of move them to the side. But I was impressed that there were people who were vomiting and working in space. Terrible space sickness, but they're there to do a job and they're going to do the job. And the idea of suffering through really attracted my attention here. Another thing is the context of it all. Got the pun there. These moments of suffering don't happen in a vacuum, except they kind of do. Astronauts in space have huge physical and emotional challenges. And one of the things that's a big, big problem is atrophy. Your muscles are not being used in space. I have this picture here because this is from one of NASA's bed rest studies. If you want to see what being in space long-term, what the impact it has on the human body, bed rest is the best analog. You lie there, and if anybody knows anyone who spent any time in the hospital, people come out much weaker. They come out sometimes having difficulty walking. They have to go through physical therapy. Long-term stays in space are very, very similar. There's also visual issues I'll talk about, bodily fluids, poor sleep. One of the astronauts I'll talk about that I refer to as Ben, I was talking to him last month as well, not his real name, and he was explaining to me that while he was in space, he just couldn't get comfortable enough to sleep. He wanted to have some pressure against him, and there are different ways to do that. He eventually stuck himself between some backpacks and the airlock, which is not like the same temperature as the rest of station anyway. But he talked about how he was both on Ambien and taking melatonin, and that if there'd been an emergency, he would not have been able to rouse himself. And he also mentioned that when he has taken Ambien on Earth, he's had entire conversations on the phone he doesn't remember. So I was a little concerned about too many astronauts on Ambien and if that ever happens, but it doesn't seem like it's a problem. Some of the other medical issues that have come up at the space conference I mentioned, one of them, and I'm using as examples, an astronaut from JAXA, the Japanese Space Agency, Chiaki Mukai, and then also Peggy Whitson, who's from NASA, the idea of fluids redistributing. And this is kind of a crude picture, but it's one I stole off Wikipedia. So this is a body on 0G with the fluids distributed kind of evenly. And when you first get to space, this is the puffy face and chicken legs period that people go through. Your heart normally has to fight gravity, right, to keep the fluid out of your legs. And so your whole body is set up so that the work of your heart is pulling fluid out of your legs. When you get into space, your heart doesn't know any better, and it keeps doing that. So it does it much better and pulls the fluid out of your legs into the entire upper half of your body, where you get this wonderful swollen face kind of look. When you adapt to microgravity, you still have this top-heavy look. It's not quite as bad. And when you return to the Earth and 1G again, after being in microgravity, most astronauts have very, very bad sickness at that point. In some cases, a recent person had to go to the hospital. He spoke at the NASA Human Research Program and Investigators Workshop. This was a public talk, and he talked about how he was thinking he was okay, but he bent down to tie his shoe, and he lost balance and tipped over and hit his head against the molding. And that was Michael Barrett. It's a public talk, I can tell you that. So he's still an active astronaut, but he was the one who had to go and be hospitalized. It was either early this year or late last year because of the sort of post-landing kind of thing. It takes a while to get adjusted. The astronaut I called Ben also talked about emotional and cognitive responses to getting back to Earth, such as when he went to lay down for the first time, the feeling that his bed flew up and hit him in the face, like it was just rushing toward him, and also the feeling lying on his bed looking at the ceiling that he should be able to push himself off and go to the ceiling, and trying to kind of get used to not being able to do that anymore. One of the big ones is SANS, which is, I can never remember it, but it's the redistribution of fluid up into the head, especially an increase in intraocular pressure. I am not going to explain this slide to you. It's there to look sciencey, but essentially what happens is there's compression on the nerve the optic nerve that causes changes and also changes in pressure on the lens and other parts of the eyes. A lot of times people with very good vision on Earth have to use glasses in space, and sometimes they never get their normal vision back even when they return to Earth because of the changes that have occurred to their eyes. And then there's radiation. If you're in space for any length of time, there are cosmic rays, which you can see when you close your eyes, which is a thing they do. But there's also radiation from solar particles. There's intravehicular secondary radiation. And the guy I call Theo said a pile of us got our lenses melted, so we had to have lens replacements. So he was talking about having cataract surgery at a very young age. Not very young, but young enough, younger than the average population. And so you do have these changes to the body brought about by microgravity and radiation that cause physical problems. And sometimes those are permanent physical problems or create chronic problems. So it's fair to say they're suffering. Another example with Ben. When Ben was up in space, sorry, I keep doing that, there was a carbon dioxide leak. And he was working on going out and doing a spacewalk, and it was giving him a splitting headache. And he ended up bringing the wrong tool with him into space to do his spacewalk. He was supposed to be working on something on the outside of the ISS. And I think it was like the wrong size wrench or something. And he ended up like trying to do it with the wrong tool. And I guess it worked, but he had this massive headache that was interfering with his ability to do the work until someone else on the ship was able to fix the carbon dioxide leak. And so physical stress affects performance. It's not just pain, but people are expected to push through it, keep going, make sure you keep going. You're supposed to keep working, but sometimes the body has other ideas. Sometimes people can't keep working, but the dedication and the feeling that you're doing something larger than yourself has really interesting parallels with what we see in religious activities that are similar. What does the body do when you're in awe? There are a lot of religious and spiritual activities that people will undergo. For instance, the Jain people in India very often fast for religious reasons. If you go for a very long time without food, obviously it's uncomfortable, but people will sometimes begin to hallucinate and have other experiences. You have people who will go without sleep and have similar circumstances. There are some Native American traditions where refraining from sleep and refraining from food in order to have spiritual experiences occur. I should point out with the space sickness, people are often not eating for long periods of time as well and not sleeping. So those circumstances in space are very similar. So astronauts are out of their element. They're weak, they can be disoriented, they can be vulnerable. And this seems, at least on Earth, to make people more receptive to moments of awe and have a stronger reaction to them. And so I have here that they're embodied reactions. There is a form of anthropology that really focuses on the physical experience of being in your body in different circumstances. We call it phenomenology, and embodiment is part of that. What is it like to physically be a person under these circumstances? And really nobody has studied microgravity and its impact or exposure to the visions and vistas you can see in space. By the way, this is somebody being tested for back pain. One of the people I met at the NASA Human Research Program Investigators Workshop a few years ago was someone who was involved in, it was like an orthopedic surgeon, but he had some novel ideas about what was causing back pain in astronauts. And he ended up working on scientific papers with NASA researchers because it's such an issue. The body is, one of the people I interviewed there, she said, the body is not designed for that. We get into zero gravity and we break. And other people disagreed with that, but it really is a difficult physical situation to be in. So a little bit about the astronaut voices I'm talking about in this particular paper. I use pseudonyms to protect their privacy. This is common in all anthropology. We don't want to talk, part of it is people won't tell you things otherwise. I'll give you an example without giving you a name. One of the people I've interviewed is not religious at all, but is a member of a denomination that's small enough that he's very important to them. And he will go and speak at religious gatherings as though he were religious, but he's not. And so that's the kind of person where if I were to use his real name, it would be a huge problem for him. And he wouldn't have told me what he told me if that were the case. So the need to be discreet, the need to use pseudonyms to hide and blur information is really important. So the three I talk about here are Ben. Ben's the one who talked about the headache from CO2. He is a shuttle era astronaut during the ISS phase. Theo, I've talked about a few times. Theo is probably not from this planet, honestly, but very curious, very adventurous, constantly seeking religious experiences. And then there's Zach, and Zach is the one I've known the longest. I feel like the Wizard of Oz, I missed you most of all, or whatever. Zach was an Apollo astronaut who was able to look into deep space while orbiting the moon, and he had a huge influence on my research going forward. So we'll talk about Theo first. Theo is the one I think is a little crazy. This is another picture by my friend Carl Tate, possibly for my book. When he was allowed to, Theo made multiple missions, and he told me that several missions, nobody would let him look out the window. You can look out the window, but he said, okay, so like imagine that there's, a beautiful starry night and you go to your living room and you look out the window and the lights are on in the house. Are you going to be able to see anything? I said, no. He goes, yeah, the normal thing would be to go outside, but we can't do that. So he had to fight. And it took him more than 2 missions to get somebody to agree to get everybody else to turn off the lights during a night pass where they're on the dark side of the earth for those 45 minutes to get the lights off so that he could get dark adapted and look outside the window. And he described the Milky Way from that perspective as a hard white wall. Can't recognize any of the constellations. And he also felt that this was an incredibly spiritual experience, that people who were not seeking it were depriving themselves of something. He said that it was as important as food or water. And he was the one who had, this is like an artist's rendering, but there's a neutral position that you can be in space. This seems to be like the body's, like no pressure points kind of thing. He would get into that position after pushing himself away from the wall, and he would call it a perfect drop. He would get into the middle of where he was on the shuttle and try not to move, get into that position and meditate. And he said he lost an awareness of his limbs first, then his torso, then his head, then his entire body. He had no idea where he was, like literally in space, and he just sort of ceased to exist. He wasn't raised Buddhist. He described it as a Buddhist meditation, maybe. But it was really one of those kinds of things where he was having an experience, a physical, this is really good from a perspective of phenomenology, a physical experience in space you can't have when you're not in space. Zach was more about looking out into space, although that was important to Theo too. He was orbiting the moon. He was by himself. And so if you know your missions, you can probably count down how many people. I can only blur people's identities so far. But he passed behind the moon, total darkness, out of communication with NASA, the other 2 guys on the moon, and he turned off all the lights. And I remember him telling me this, and I was so like, oh, this is great. When I was talking to him, we have a restaurant in Grand Rapids called Gravity, and I met him there because I had to. He let me suggest the restaurant. Anyway, he said that he was not prepared for what he saw. There were so many stars, he couldn't see between them. And it was really the first time in his life he had understood just how many stars there were. And he said he had to get back to work. But when he got back to Earth, he spent time writing poetry, he spent time journaling, he couldn't sleep. He would just think about what he had seen and what it meant. And this is a very rare experience. Astronauts are very busy. They have a checklist they have to go through. The idea of being in the dark long enough to get adapted and looking out into space is very rare. He said his conclusion, and I'm quoting, "We don't know crap about anything." We really don't. It changed his sense that I kind of know what's going on too. I have no idea what's going on. And that's very different from what people feel with the overview effect. That's why I called this the ultraview effect. His whole understanding of time, why we're here, what we're supposed to do changed, and his spirituality changed. So the three things I want to talk about, and how am I for time? I'm okay? Okay. All right. One of them is obviously the overview effect, Frank White's concept. The picture I have over here, a lot of you I know are super familiar with this. This is Earthrise, taken by Bill Anders during the Apollo 8 mission. Gorgeous picture of the Earth over the surface of the moon. And the way that people first began thinking of like the Earth as a blue marble, understanding like the whole Earth catalog kind of came from this. It's very common for astronauts in the International Space Station to look out the cupola, which is the window that has been, built there after a while, and look at the continents, look at the lights, look at the Terminator, which is obviously, you guys know, the darkness meets light, watch that move, they watch storms. That feeling of understanding the Earth, being close to the Earth, floating over a part of the world. There's an astronaut, I didn't interview him, but Jeff Hoffman, I actually interviewed both of his rabbis, which is kind of weird. But he took a Torah with him into space and read the Torah while floating over Israel. So that kind of thing is like not what you can do on Earth. It's very cool. It was kind of an interesting thing. By the way, I asked his rabbi if he thought taking the Torah into space made the Torah more holy, and he near about took my head off. He said, if anything, it made space more holy. Like, okay, good to know. I just wondered which direction the energy flowed, so now I know. But looking at the Earth from space, it's home. It's full of color. It's full of life. It's beautiful. On the other hand, when you're orbiting the moon, it's not the same thing. Zach described it as harsh, shadowed, and unwelcoming. And I brought up a quote from him that I wanted to read. This is from, I think, our second interview. He said, "You can look at the moon and see the dark circles and all that from Earth, but until you get close to it and you see the smaller craters and you see how sharply defined they are, and you see the very sharp shadow patterns cast by the sun, well, you're seeing it for the first time. And it's hostile. It's a very unfriendly place. It's very unforgiving, very, very difficult. The moon is so stark, so sharp, so forbidding that you still got that impression even inside the spacecraft." So when astronauts, and hopefully Artemis 2, the astronauts there will get a chance to do that soon. When you're orbiting the moon, it's not that comforting, beautiful blue orb. It's the worst desert you've ever seen. And it doesn't care about you the same way the Earth does. Astronauts who have orbited the moon have had different reactions to it, but looking at the Earth is very different from looking at the moon. And not a lot of people have looked into this sort of lunar overview effect. What is it like to look at the moon from space? So I'm very interested in the awe that that creates. It had a huge impression on Zach. And he thought it might have been, one of the best things that he experienced while he was in space, even though it felt alien to him. Then we have the Milky Way. Some astronauts like Theo and Zach got dark adapted, were able to look out into space, and they don't see pinpoint stars. It's described as a solid sheet of light, a solid wall of light, hard white wall. Beautiful, but overwhelming, something that makes you feel like you don't know anything. This has not been studied. Very few astronauts have experienced this because the conditions that allow you to experience it are so rare. And this seems to be something that causes people to really question what they know. I haven't worked on this too much yet because this was a recent interview, but the astronaut I called Ben had a different experience where he was in the middle of a spacewalk and looked past the Earth into space. He was not dark adapted, but that feeling of endless space in front of him was another experience he had that made him feel very weird and very like disconcerted, not comforting. And I think there's a lot of stuff that if you're on Earth and you look out into space, my family and I were able to go to the Big Island. We didn't get to go up on Mauna Kea, but we were able to go to a beach on the northwest part of the island that was very, very dark. And we saw the Milky Way there, and it was life-changing. It was beautiful. Spending 45 minutes looking at that. Looking at space from space seems to be more. We see pictures, right? We see the Hubble telescope. We see what am I saying? Why am I blanking on his name? Webb, there we go. The Webb telescope. And those are amazing. I don't know if anybody else like freaks out looking at the deep field pictures with all the galaxies. It's like, I cannot understand it. But seeing that with your own eyes seems to be something that's amazing as well. So I've been talking to some people I know. NASA's planning a gateway space station that's going to be orbiting the moon from a Lagrange point, so very steady area. This is an artist's rendering. And the European Space Agency is building this lunar view module. And it will be in orbit around the moon. And you can see the moon in this picture, this artist's rendering. But it also has windows that are pointed at Earth, which is going to be small, and pointing out into deep space. And I've been talking to a couple professionals I know. One is a psychologist and one of them is in space medicine. And NASA was requesting, it was a call for information rather than a call for proposals. What can they do in terms of experiments in this gateway space station that they wouldn't be able to do from the International Space Station? So our suggestion, they were collecting suggestions, was to use this lunar view module to allow astronauts to look out into space, into deep darkness while dark adapted, to look at the moon from lunar orbit, to look at the Earth, and to take psychological profiles. That was the psychologist's contribution. My suggestion was to keep diaries of their own feelings and understandings as they look at these different views, how they change over time, how they affect mood. And I think there are opportunities there. I was thrilled when I found out that they'd installed those windows for essentially different kinds of gazing purposes. So understanding how people respond to these vistas in space can support emotional and mental health, tell us a lot about human cognition. I have no doubt, because humans practice religion and humans in space continue to practice religion. I can tell you stories, that there will be religious moments if the Gateway space station is built. It's hard to know with projects like these. Sometimes they get built, sometimes they don't. But the idea of being able to look out into space and really understand what it means to see space from space, I think is going to be very meaningful. And that's my last slide, except, it's not my last slide, I'm lying to you. So we need to understand how space doesn't just affect our bodies, which we know a lot about, but also our minds and how we understand ourselves. And these cosmic vistas might influence the way human cultures in space develop. If we ever establish a permanent off-Earth presence, we're going to have to adjust to physical situations, but also mental and emotional situations that we don't have here on Earth. And so understanding what these mean to astronauts now could help us understand what's going to impact humans in the future out in space. And so anthropology, my discipline, helps us explore the human side of exploration, not just science, but the subjective aspects of it and where meaning comes from for people like us. So thank you very much.
Deana, you said that seeing the Milky Way like that for some people has a profound effect on them. And it's only happened to a couple people.
I mean, I'm sure there are people who I haven't talked to who've had that experience. I have a very small number that I'm able to talk to.
I'm just curious, you know, as we go out in the future and we have these observing things, and more people experience this, are you expecting to see a wide range of reaction? I mean, could it send some people into literal catatonia?
I would be surprised, but if somebody has certain fears, or if somebody is, I'm trying to think of a good way to phrase this. If somebody is trying to figure out what reality is, and this hits them at the wrong moment, I could see it being something where they would probably need a lot of therapy as a result. And this is one of the things where I feel like NASA maybe should like keep this in mind. Just because the two people I know who've really sought it out, it had a huge impact on them. On the other hand, you're probably going to have people like the one person I mentioned who had no overview effect, who was like, yeah, it was fine. He even told me, like, I tried to meditate a little bit and then I went to the cupola, I looked out and yeah, it was okay. So
you're gonna have a range.
You're going to have a range for sure, but there might be ways to predict that. There might be ways to kind of mediate that, lead people toward being less freaked out, or if you want to do space tourism and give people an amazing grand religious experience, prime people to have that experience.
Yeah, when I went up to Michigan Tech, I took my telescope up to the Keweenaw Peninsula, right?
Mhm.
Right, near the rocket range.
Right.
And this was in 2000. I took my telescope out, looked up at the sky and went, I can't find anything. So I kind of get the impression, but I can't imagine just a white wall.
Right. And I had one astronomer, well, not astronomer, but he was a planetarium director in Germany who wrote to him and he's like, I don't think this can be true. I think it's an issue with like their optics. I think it's a physiological thing. And I'm like, that would also be good to know. Because these two people I spoke to who had this very similar experience didn't see it as something going on with their eyes. They saw it as something going on in space. So.
Any other questions?
Have you questioned any of the people that have gone on these space tours?
Not yet.
Can you repeat the question?
I was asked whether I've questioned anybody who's gone on, hello. This, I think we're okay with the screen. You could see my initial, like, my reaction was to wave my arms because that's what happens at my school. There's no motion, and so you have to dance around to get the lights to come back on. By which I assumed you meant like space tourism, right? So people going up and doing a suborbital. Right, right. By the way, I wrote about that. I think that reaction was so over the top.
People online can't hear them.
Oh, okay. So the commenter said that the 7 women, I think it was 6 women who went into space on Blue Origin a couple of weeks ago. So that was New Shepard 34, I think. And I had just mentioned that I ended up writing an article about that because the reaction online was just so angry. Apparently one of the Backstreet Boys is going up soon, and I bet that hardly anybody says anything. So it was interesting why this was a violation, and that's really what my article was about. On the Space Review, if you read the Space Review. Anyway, I do think that people who go into space for 4 or 5 minutes at a time can have experiences in space, but I think they're more likely to be the overview effect looking back at Earth. I don't think under the circumstances of being in space for 4 or 5 minutes, anybody's going to be able to get dark adapted and look out into deep space. It's possible with some other forms of tourism that are longer, that something like that might happen, but the ones that we're talking about now, I don't think so.
Yes.
So in line with that same kind of question with William Shatner now, right? His response was like almost just, it was the opposite, right? Now, do you think it's because he expected so much?
Okay, so the question was about William Shatner's experience in space. Just as some background, he went up on Blue Origin in October 2021, and he came back talking about death. he saw death, it was terrible. Going out into space was, I wrote an article about this too. How going up into space allowed him to understand what death was, and it was scary, and life is, the only place where there's life is here on Earth. He used metaphors that had to do with comforters and pillows and blankets on Earth, which I thought was really interesting. And his reaction, it tickled my sense of humor to watch him corner Jeff Bezos upon landing and spill out this unfiltered emotional reaction to being in space that wasn't the kind of thing you could put on like an advertisement. It was death, like nobody's going to buy that, right? But his experience was very strong, and I was really impressed by the emotion that he showed. And it was fascinating to see somebody who was not a NASA-trained military type astronaut be able to express their feelings with that amount of detail. It was brand new. It was fantastic, I thought.
I'm not an astronaut, I just play one on television.
Right.
We've got some comments here online that says, this is one of the most interesting talks we've had at the WASP.
Well, thank you.
And we have another one, wonderful talk, interesting about the range of responses and just a few people interviewed. Personally, I'm glad I'm never going into space. I feel awe enough on here on Earth when I see the Milky Way.
That's good. Yeah, I totally agree that going up into space really, I have more I could say, but
Wanted to as a kid, real bad.
yeah, no, I mean,
Not anymore.
yeah, I have mixed feelings. I would probably, under this right circumstances, do one of the short ones, be terrified the entire time. But if it was something where I could be like, I'll be home in 15 minutes, like maybe I would do that.
Can I make a comment?
Sure.
You mentioned being on a beach
Mhm.
on one of the Hawaiian Islands. I had the experience, John Blum invited me to come out and spend some time with him on Maui. And we went up on top of this volcano called Haleakala one night. After our eyes were dark adapted, I could see the Milky Way so clearly that I could see my shadow by the light of the Milky Way. I was amazed. So I'm just saying, for those of us who are ordinary mortals, you may, if you go to a place like that, I mean, you're surrounded by the darkness of the Pacific Ocean. You're at 10,000 feet altitude. Any lights down around the periphery of the island are way down out of your line of sight. It's really dark up there. So that's a place where you might have an experience somewhat similar to what you'd have if you're in space with the lights out, looking out at the Milky Way. But for something an ordinary mortal can afford to pay for. Any other questions? Okay, let's thank our speaker again.
I want our audience to see you, so
Oh,
I'd be
this is
on camera now. So there she is, that's our speaker.
the lighting's not the best, but this is.
All righty, so
All right,
thank you
thank
very
you.
much. All right, so our next meeting will be next week at Macomb Community College, South Campus, 12 Mile and Hayes. Our next Star Party is Saturday, May 24th. Several of us indulge in gastronomy after astronomy at the Red Coat Tavern at Woodward, north of 13 Mile. And with that, the meeting's over. Good night, clear skies, and safe travels. Right? Yay! Good night, everyone. Maybe.